Welcome to Jenny Talks. Today I am going to tell how to marry a Vietnamese bride. And what's the price? In 2010, the price of a Vietnamese bride was $3,000. So, what is the price in 2024? I will reveal the answer in the end of this show. Please note, when I say price, I don't just mean money, but also the effort, expectations, and sacrifices you make. Many Western men know about the concept of renting a wife in Thailand, which is a short-term relationship. However, if you want a long-term relationship with a gentle, slim, young woman and get married, then marrying a Vietnamese bride is a great choice. But how can you marry a bride from far away? First, let me reveal a few Vietnamese bride scams. Some people have encountered Vietnamese bride scams on online dating sites. The Vietnamese woman you meet online never meets you in person, but asks you to send money under various pretexts. This woman might exist or might not, and it could be a scammer using a young girl's photos. This kind of online scam is easy to spot. If a woman you've never met asks you to send money, it's almost certainly a scam. Now, there's a new kind of Vietnamese bride scam. A young Vietnamese woman meets you, marries you, and lives with you for some time, maybe a week, a month, or even a year, then suddenly disappears one day with your money and the gifts you bought for her. This leaves you heartbroken and not only financially ruined, but also losing hope in life. And some may even consider suicide. Chinese men were the first to experience this kind of Vietnamese bride scam. After decades of the one-child policy, the gender ratio in China has become alarmingly imbalanced at 105 men for every 100 women, meaning many Chinese men can't find wives and have to look to neighboring Vietnam. Vietnam's economy is less developed than China's, so many Vietnamese women dream of marrying into China to live a prosperous life. In China, marrying a Chinese wife requires a bride price of about $30,000 to $80,000, plus the requirement of buying a house and a car, making the average cost around $300,000, which is unaffordable for many men. In 2010, an attractive offer appeared, $3,000 for a Vietnamese bride. These Vietnamese girls, though cheap, were high quality, kind, capable, and sometimes very beautiful, with most being virgins. These cross-border matchmakers provided a price list: $1,000 to $1,500 for average-looking girls with primary education, $1,500 to $3,000 for those with middle school education, and $2,000 to $3,500 for beautiful girls with only primary education. So $3,000 for a bride wasn't an exaggeration, but a reality. This price included the bride price and all the expenses from meeting to bringing her home, including the matchmaker's fee. These matchmakers mainly targeted men from China, Taiwan, and South Korea. After a few men successfully married such high-quality Vietnamese brides, many Chinese men flocked to Vietnam to find wives. This led to the emergence of industrialized Vietnamese matchmaking tours. Single men from various parts of China were organized into travel groups to Saigon, Vietnam, where they met Vietnamese girls aged from 18 to 26, mostly from rural areas. The meeting process involved 6 to 8 girls standing in a row for the men to choose from. If unsatisfied, the men could see the next batch. If a man liked a girl and found her suitable after spending a couple of days together, he could pay the matchmaker and prepare for marriage. The matchmaker would handle the wedding and paperwork. The whole process, from meeting the girl to bringing her back home, usually took about a month, making it a quick international marriage. The matchmakers were relatively honest about sensitive issues like the girl's education, health, and family background, without making exaggerated promises. Some even conducted regular follow-ups to check on the client's satisfaction. Videos online showed that husbands generally praised their Vietnamese wives for being simple and kind. Due to the high-quality and low-cost Vietnamese brides, Chinese and Korean men flocked to Vietnam. This demand raised the price to $6,000, but it was still very reasonable. Continuous groups of Chinese men went to Vietnam to meet young Vietnamese girls, buy them new clothes at malls, and visit their parents' homes. Typically, men would buy gifts for the girls' parents, which wasn't included in the matchmaker's $6,000 fee. These men then brought their brides back to China, where the young women, with strong fertility, soon had children. As more Chinese men rushed to Vietnam, the price for a Vietnamese bride rose to $12,000 but was still cheaper than marrying a local Chinese woman. The industry developed quickly, with more comprehensive services from matchmakers. They even brought Vietnamese women to China for men to choose from, saving travel costs. These Vietnamese women didn't care about their husband's age, appearance, or intelligence, and were good at flirting, though they didn't want to do housework or farm work. Chinese husbands didn't mind as long as the women were willing to sleep with them and bear children. Everything seemed perfect, like hitting the lottery for these Chinese men, but soon they realized they were being deceived. In 2016, 10 Vietnamese brides collectively escaped from a rural village in Fujian province, China. A few days later, the only 2 remaining brides also escaped while working with their husbands. The sudden disappearance of the brides left these Chinese husbands devastated. One husband couldn't believe his wife had run away, insisting that she always cuddled him to sleep and called him husband, leaving lipstick marks all over his face. The police found that the brides took all the gold jewelry and clothes their husbands had given them, but left behind stacks of condoms. The deceived husbands later found out that although the Vietnamese brides had sex with them, they insisted on using condoms to avoid pregnancy. Even those brides who had children sometimes abandoned their kids and ran away. The most outrageous scam involved a Vietnamese man, Nguyen, who brought his wife Huai to China in September 2021. Nguyen claimed to be Huai's brother and married her to a Chinese man, Liang, receiving about $13,000 in bride price. On the same day, Liang slept with Huai while Nguyen, posing as her brother, stayed to help with wedding preparations. Within 3 days, Huai and Nguyen, who was actually her husband, got Liang drunk and disappeared with about $15,000. Liang reported to the police, who caught Huai and Nguyen 6 months later. During that time, Nguyen had married Huai to 5 more Chinese men, scamming them out of around $100,000 in total bride price. On one hand, Chinese men were increasingly getting scammed, and on the other, Vietnamese brides felt they were being deceived too. In 2012, 2 Vietnamese girls were recruited by matchmakers to marry 2 wealthy Chinese men. These girls came from poor families with little education and knew little about China. The cross-border matchmakers exploited their ignorance, exaggerating everything about China. They promised the girls that their Chinese husbands were wealthy, caring businessmen, and they would live a happy life in China with plenty of job opportunities and easy money. However, when these Vietnamese girls arrived in China, they found a huge gap between their expectations and reality. Their husbands were ordinary men earning $500 to $1,000 a month, with poor economic conditions, unattractive looks, introverted personalities, old age, or even physical defects. The disappointment made the Vietnamese brides feel cheated. With no family in China and unable to afford a ticket home, one Vietnamese bride chose to accept her fate and stay, giving birth to a child and living an unhappy life, while the other chose to escape, becoming a runaway bride. Nowadays, international matchmaking has become more commercialized. Matchmakers actively collect information on unmarried Vietnamese women, persuading them to marry foreigners. These Vietnamese brides are not only marrying into China, South Korea, and Taiwan, but also increasingly marrying into India, the UK, France, and the USA. In Vietnam, there are agencies that package Vietnamese brides, training them in foreign languages, cooking foreign dishes, and providing maid-like services to men to earn matchmaking fees. Foreign men, desperate to find wives, think that by spending money, the woman will be theirs forever, without considering the possibility of marriage scams. Vietnamese brides face many challenges after arriving in a foreign country, such as language barriers, cultural differences, and lifestyle adjustments. In 2017, a 38-year-old Chinese man, A. Shu, paid a matchmaker $6,000 to marry a Vietnamese bride because he was too introverted to find a Chinese wife. Just a month after the wedding, the Vietnamese bride asked to return to Vietnam, claiming her father was critically ill. To gain A. Shu's permission, she knelt and pleaded, promising to return soon. A. Shu agreed and gave her $200 for travel expenses, but the bride never returned, and A. Shu was left with nothing. When his parents confronted the matchmaker, they found out the bride said A. Shu was boring and they couldn't communicate, so she returned to Vietnam. A. Shu ended up marrying a genuine Vietnamese bride, but was still left empty-handed. There's also the professional scam where Vietnamese brides are true marriage scammers and runaways. In late 2016, a Chinese bachelor, Zhao, was introduced to Vietnamese Xie Xiaohua. She cried about her tough life in Vietnam and wanted to marry into a Chinese family. Xi's aunt and translator, Chen, arranged the marriage, collecting about $20,000 in bride price. Soon after, Xi disappeared. The police discovered that 50-year-old Chen and 20-year-old Xi were both local Vietnamese women, but not related as aunt and niece. They were actually part of a scam group that had conned Chinese men into marriage at least 10 times, netting about $200,000. This type of scam is called rotation brides. Each time the bride marries a man, lives with him for about a month, then disappears and marries the next man, repeating the process. For these brides, each marriage is real, and they even engage in sexual relations with their husbands, but they carry condoms to avoid pregnancy. Most of these rotation brides are not inherently bad people. They are young, poor Vietnamese women. Some are doing it to pay for their parents' medical bills or to send their siblings to school, hoping to make quick and substantial money. You might wonder why so many Vietnamese brides want to marry foreigners. A key reason is the gender ratio in Vietnam, where there are more women than men. To balance this ratio, promote births, and supplement the population, the Vietnamese government has even considered polygamy. Additionally, influenced by ancient Chinese culture, Vietnam still has a male-dominated society. Men only work if they find respectable jobs, otherwise, they don't work. Women, on the other hand, must work from adulthood, often taking low-paying and tough jobs. If you travel to Vietnam, you'll notice that most restaurant staff, shop clerks, and street vendors are women. Vietnamese women not only do housework, but also earn money for their families, while the men often do nothing. This explains why nearly every Vietnamese bride in media reports mentions difficult living conditions, including both material poverty and gender discrimination. Compared to 2010, Vietnamese women still want to marry abroad, but now they prefer men from Western countries over Asian ones. Over a decade ago, Chinese men could essentially buy wives from Vietnam, with Vietnamese agencies even distributing paper advertisements in China for this purpose. Today, marrying a Vietnamese bride has evolved into a seemingly legitimate industry. These international matchmaking agencies that cater to Western men charge varying fees depending on the girl's qualifications. One thing is certain, the price is much higher than the $3,000 it was in 2010. However, if you're lucky and exceptional, you might find a Vietnamese bride who loves you for who you are, not just your money. If you want to marry a genuine and loyal Vietnamese bride, start to learn about Vietnamese culture, respect their customs, and let the Vietnamese bride understand your background and lifestyle before marriage. Once she is prepared, your marriage will be more likely to succeed.